We are just getting word that the former Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, has died in prison. When you think about Ted Kaczynski, given your position within national security, what comes to mind, and the fact that he has passed in prison after serving many years behind bars? On reflection, what do you think?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting end of what was really the start of the terrorism era in many ways. If you remember back, he was sending mail bombs, I think as late as the 1970s, going well into the 1990s. If I remember correctly, he was convicted in the mid-1990s and was seen as one of the most hottest, really in prison for many decades. And it was during the era when we were worried about domestic terrorism. Remember in the 1990s, before 9/11, we were talking about Eric Rudolph. We were talking about Ted Kaczynski. We were talking about Timothy McVeigh. Those were the big terrorist attacks of the 1990s. They were domestic in origin, and his case was probably the most complex. He sent a series of bombs. It took him a long time. The FBI, the massive investigation spanning many different states and jurisdictions. And really what was the thing that brought Kaczynski down was they actually allowed the media to print his manifesto. And that is what broke the case open, because his brother, Kaczynski's brother, was the one that read the manifesto and recognized the writing. So it was a remarkable investigative step. You know, they didn't want the manifesto out there because it might inspire others, but at the same point, it was a clue that if you can open it up to a crowd, this would have been a very early sort of version of crowdsourcing. If you can open it up into a crowd, you can get lots of tips and leads, and that's exactly what happened with that method.
Given the time when this happened, I mean, as you say, it was sort of prescient to things that happen in a more commonplace way, tragically, since he was arrested. What do you think that was like for the FBI, being an insider and working on this, and really the concern, the level of concern within the FBI trying to find this guy, because it was like a needle in a haystack?
This was one of the cases I was trained on as a brand new agent at the FBI Academy. It was one of the, terrorism cases that they sort of trained on, like, what do you do when you have a lone actor who's highly intelligent, who knows how to cover their tracks, who uses a somewhat random pattern and try and trace it out when they're delivering through the mail. It is the last of really the pre-internet, highly complex terrorism investigations in many ways. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of agents that worked on this case over many years. And it really just points back to like how complex things were in the analog era. You were looking at newspapers, you were looking at linguistics, you were taking tips and leads off of telephones and going out and interviewing people in person. Very different from the investigations you'd see today, which largely are driven by internet traffic, social media presence, doing, polls of cell phones and credit cards. Wildly different compared to what we see today. It's really a forerunner of what was to come.
Yeah. And is that, you think, because of the internet that we would never see the likes of a 17-year bombing campaign that killed 3 people, injuring 23 others, that was conducted by Ted Kaczynski, for which he was put behind bars for 4 life sentences? Do you think that we wouldn't see that today because of the ability that the FBI, DOJ, investigators have to scour the internet and use technology to do so?
Yes, it's not just the internet. It's also a lot of the technical capability that cases like this actually spawned, which was, how do we understand and trace mail traffic? How do we look for fingerprints in different locations or ways? There's lots of different, imagery and sensors that are out there now that we can use. And also just in terms of, think of everything from license plate readers to, CCTV cameras that are around every building. Wildly different today. So you would have had a lot more tips and clues likely than you would have back then when there just wasn't much connectivity. So I think the evidence trail in some ways is actually easier today. But what we mostly see is crimes that are occurring by, with, and through the internet rather than doing it in the analog method. And I think that's what was so complex about this is he stretched his attacks out over many, many years. And he did it using the mail system in a way that you just couldn't do those sort of technical forensics back then.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Again, the Unabomber Ted Kaczynski, dead today at the age of 81. He passed away in North Carolina at a federal prison medical center.